I'm starting a no spend challenge or a use it up challenge. Over the past 6 months or so, I have accumulated a lot of different Dollar Tree food items, and I would like to start using up some of the inventory that I have built up so I can go into 2023 with a bit of a fresh start. I don't have a defined expiration date on how long this challenge is going to last. As you can see, I have a lot of different pantry items to use up, seasonings and condiments, things that I purchased for videos but haven't yet used because I sometimes have difficulty organizing my thoughts and ideas. But I don't necessarily have a lot in the way of frozen and refrigerated items, so I will probably run out of those first and foremost, which will allow me to at least deplete some of the extra pantry items that I have already purchased. I'm actually looking forward to this challenge, so stay tuned to see what I create. Day one of my no spend grocery challenge, I started off by prepping these oatmeal and fruit breakfast muffins. The first thing I did was pull anything out of my pantry, fridge, or freezer that was somewhat of a breakfast item. So pancake mix, oatmeal packets, frozen fruit, all of that. I knew I wasn't going to use all of it, but having everything in front of me allowed me to figure out what I could use. First thing I did was measure how much pancake mix I had left, which was about a cup of dry mix. I added 2 cups of applesauce that I had in my pantry in place of water, and then I decided to add 3 of my packets of peaches and cream oatmeal mix to that. I wasn't too worried about the mix being dry because I knew that the frozen fruit would add some moisture as well. I decided to go with the mango blend of fruit because I thought it would blend well with the peach flavor of the oatmeal. I finally chopped my frozen fruit, mixed it into my batter, and then I divided it into paper-lined muffin tins and baked it at 400 degrees for 18 to 20 minutes. I wanted to try one warm out of the oven despite these being a meal prep breakfast option. They did stick to the paper lining a little bit, but I spread some strawberry preserves on each half and I was pleasantly surprised at how delicious these were. I was mostly surprised because I don't actually like peach or mango, but I actually ended up really enjoying these muffins, and these are all standard ingredients at Dollar Tree that you can still purchase, so I've included the recipe card as well. Day one of my no spend challenge. For dinner, I made a hot ham and cheese sandwich. I served this along with some cheddar broccoli rice, and for dessert, I made a berry crisp. These garlic bread loaves were new to my Dollar Tree, and I knew they would make a great hot ham and cheese sandwich, so I had some smoked deli ham and some leftover American cheese. My garlic bread was thawed and I pre-baked it at 400 degrees for 8 minutes until it was golden brown. I topped each half with 6 slices of smoked deli ham and 2 slices of American cheese, and I returned this back to the oven for 10 minutes until everything was heated through and melted. I had a bag of broccoli in my fridge that needed to be used up, so I chopped it up finely and cooked it with a package of Knorr cheddar broccoli rice. In the last couple of minutes of cooking, I stirred in 2 slices of American cheese and a teaspoon of chicken bouillon powder. And of course, I didn't necessarily need a dessert, but I thought it was a fun addition, so to a bowl, I added 4 packets of original instant oatmeal. I also added about a half a cup of brown sugar, a quarter cup of flour, and then I mixed that together with a half a stick of melted margarine. I added my fruit to the bottom of a baking dish, which was a bag of berry and banana blend, which had pretty much thawed out. I topped it with my crumble and baked it in the oven at 400 degrees for around 20 minutes. And now it's time to taste test everything. The cheesy broccoli rice was perfect. I mean, you can't go wrong with anything cheese and broccoli related. The ham and cheese sandwich was actually better than I expected it to be, although it was a little on the salty side because I find that these Dollar Tree American slices to be a little bit salty, so if I were to make it again, I would use 2 slices of cheese as opposed to 4. The berry crisp had a perfect texture, but it was lacking in sweetness because Dollar Tree berries are a little bit on the tart side, so I ended up topping it with some honey blend syrup, or I could have grabbed some Cool Whip out of the fridge if I had remembered that I had it. The first few days of a no spend challenge are always the easiest, so it's going to get more interesting as we progress along. Day 2 of my no spend challenge, I made vegetarian enchiladas. I used flour tortillas, Spanish rice, refried beans, rotel, corn, green enchilada sauce, and pepper jack cheese. Someone in the comments suggested using the drained liquid from Rotel to cook the Spanish rice. I didn't really get much liquid out of this can, but it was worth a shot. I added my packet of Spanish rice and 2 cups of water into a skillet, brought this up to a boil, and then covered and simmered for 15 minutes. Once my rice had finished cooking, I stirred in 1 cup of corn and my Rotel. I allowed this to heat through until the corn was no longer frozen. I also grated my block of pepper jack cheese for topping, and then I was ready to assemble my enchiladas. I filled each tortilla with a pretty hefty amount of Spanish rice and refried beans. The refried beans I'm pretty much just using straight out of the can. I didn't heat them up or anything. I made these quite full because I didn't want to be eating enchiladas for a long time. I wanted to make about 6 or so. Typically, you'd lay down a layer of enchilada sauce to prevent sticking, but I only had the one can to work with and it was quite small, so I used parchment paper instead. Once I had stuffed all 6 of my enchiladas, I topped it with my green enchilada sauce and my shredded pepper jack cheese. I baked this at 400 degrees for 20 minutes. And here's what they looked like out of the oven. I loved how golden brown they got on top. Almost everything that I'm using to make these are pretty much my favorite products, so I didn't really have any surprises here as far as flavor goes. The only thing I had to try was the green enchilada sauce, and that was actually really good. I ended up liking the green better than I've liked the red one that I've purchased in the past. And so this is a super low-cost vegetarian dinner option. You can make it even cheaper if you omit the corn and rotel and just stuff the enchiladas with beans and rice. I also had a lot of beans and rice left over, so I could have potentially made more enchiladas. Even I get intimidated by unfamiliar ingredients at times, which was the case with this ham and potato soup that I made. I used an ingredient that I don't typically use, and so I didn't think I would like it, but it turned out really good. This was the ingredient in question. These are salt-cured country ham biscuit slices. I talked about them during my Dollar Tree Thanksgiving shopping video, and a lot of you guys had suggestions on removing the salt content, but there was one comment that talked about using the country ham as a seasoning, and I thought that was a really interesting concept and one that I have been wanting to test out for quite a while. So along with the ham, I had a can of sliced carrots, I had some cauliflower and cheese sauce, I had a bag of these steak cut french fries in my freezer, and then of course my trade secret is this vegetable bouillon powder. I really miss being able to buy these steak cut french fries at Dollar Tree. I haven't seen them at my store in a while, maybe your store still carry them, but that's why you haven't seen me use these in a video recently. So I cut them up into bite-sized pieces as I usually do. I like these because they're unseasoned and unbreaded. They're essentially just blanched potatoes that are frozen, so they're a great substitute for potatoes in almost every recipe. From here, I just dumped everything into my crock pot, starting with the diced potatoes. Then I added in the bag of cauliflower with cheese sauce, my can of carrots that I had drained, and my country ham. I did fry up the country ham in a skillet just for some added flavor, and I left the ham whole so that in case I didn't like it, I could easily remove it later on. I added enough water to cover everything and then seasoned it with 1 tablespoon of my bouillon powder, and I was careful not to over season this because again the ham is acting as most of the seasoning and salt in the recipe. I covered and cooked this on high for 6 hours, and here was the final result. I tasted a piece of ham and it was not salty at all. The broth had a really rich flavor to it, so I thought that this actually worked out perfectly to my plan. I did remove the ham, chopped it up into bite-sized pieces, and added it back into the soup before serving. I did season my bowl with black pepper, but I didn't feel the need to add any additional salt or seasoning beyond that. And this is kind of the fun part about what I do, because Dollar Tree inventory can sometimes feel limiting at times with my creative process, but it's fun to use things in a different way than I normally would, or to try new ingredients that I would otherwise overlook. And the best part is sharing the process so that if you've been unsure about something, now you know that you can use it in a different way. Day 4 of my no spend challenge, I have had this Flamin' Hot Cheetos in my pantry for months now. It's finally time to try to make a meal out of it. I had a can of chili, a can of diced tomatoes, a block of Monterey Jack cheese, and I had some Dollar Tree Takis, so why not have some fun with it? Now, I prefer pepper jack over Monterey Jack, but I had this block in my fridge and it's been in there for quite a while now, so I definitely needed to use it up. Into a pot, I added my pasta, 1.5 cups of water, my diced tomatoes, my can of chili, and the seasoning packet from the mac and cheese. I stirred this all together, and I'm definitely not one to ever judge a food by what it looks like, but I was getting a good laugh over how red this was. I brought this up to a boil, and then I covered and simmered it for 10 minutes, stirring once halfway through, and then at the very end I stirred in my Monterey Jack cheese. I portioned this out into a bowl and then topped it with a handful of crushed up Takis, which I probably should not have crushed by hand because it almost stained my hands. And now it's time for the taste test. The Takis added a nice crunchy textural element to this, but the lime flavor was slightly overpowering, so it was hard to taste the rest of the dish. I found that the Flamin' Hot Cheetos mac and cheese just wasn't my favorite. I think that of the 3, the cheesy jalapeno is definitely the best, but this was fun to try, and I technically still have another box, so I may try to make another meal out of another one later later on. We are on to day 5 of my no spend challenge, and last night I made a pasta in a meat sauce and layered some creamy spinach throughout. This was somewhat of an experimental idea, but one that turned out incredibly delicious, especially when eaten on top of garlic toast. I used penne pasta, garlic and herb pasta sauce, a package of beef patties, a roll of sausage, a block of cream cheese, a bag of frozen spinach, and of course garlic toast for a side dish. I softened my block of cream cheese and mashed it with a fork, and then I thawed my spinach in the microwave for a couple of minutes, and then I drained this by putting it in a tea towel and squeezing out all of the extra moisture, and then I mixed my spinach in with my cream cheese. Then I started on my meat sauce by browning and crumbling my beef patty over medium-high heat. I get asked a lot about why I rinse these, and the reason is that they have a lot of salt in them because they are pre-seasoned, pre-formed burger patty, so I prefer to rinse them to remove some of the salt content. I also browned my sausage over medium-high heat, but with the sausage I leave the drippings in so it adds extra flavor to the sauce. I added back in my beef crumbles and then I stirred in my pasta sauce. I brought this up to a boil and then allowed it to simmer for about 5 to 10 minutes or so just so the flavors could start to meld. And the last thing I did was cook half a box of penne pasta in boiling salted water, and for those of you who don't know, laying a wooden spoon across the top of your pot will stop it from boiling over. I boiled this for 12 minutes and then I drained it. I added my meat sauce in with my pasta and mixed this to combine, and then I layered this into a baking dish, starting with half of the pasta mixture, half of the spinach and cream cheese mixture, then the other half of the pasta, and the other half of the cream cheese spinach mixture. I baked this at 400 degrees for 15 minutes, and in the last 8 minutes of cooking I added my garlic bread alongside it. I expected the spinach mixture to melt into the pasta on top, but it didn't. It just stayed in its little balls, so I had to spread it out with a spoon for the final presentation. What would have really set this over the edge is some mozzarella cheese melted on top or some Parmesan cheese, but this was a use it up, no spend challenge, and I didn't have either of those, so I just made it as is. As it stands, this was an $8.75 dinner, but if you added some mozzarella cheese for a topping, it becomes a $10 dinner for 4 people.